Good morning, everybody, and thank you for tuning in for another session of the Ice Blue Sky Soapbox podcast. And with me this morning, I have Charlotte from Ice Blue Sky and Robert Norum. But they're going to do a far better job of actually introducing themselves and a little bit of their background. I'm one of the directors here at Ice Blue Sky, but I'm going to pass over to Charlotte. Introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about who you are.
Thanks, Graham. So I'm Charlotte. I'm the Chief Exec of Ice Blue Sky. Worked in the technology sector for about 28 years, so have a lot of scars.
And a lot of stories.
Sure, and a lot of stories, yeah. So, I love doing this podcast because I get a chance to air out some of my frustrations.
Yeah, and Robert, we brought you along today because we know you got
a ringer.
Yeah, because you got a good view. You've got a good view on the industry and what we do. But why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you and your background?
Okay. Well, I've been in B2B marketing for far too long. I normally cap it at 30 years, just so I don't sound even older than I actually am. It is a little bit longer than that. But I've specialised in account-based marketing for the last 12 years. I run the ABM Essentials training course for B2B marketing. I'm a so-called ABM and demand strategy expert on Propolis, which is their community. And I work with agencies like yourselves, and I work with clients, and I obviously do quite a bit of training too.
Fantastic. So a real deep, rich understanding of reality, what's actually going on out there.
I like to think so. I'm not sure my wife and kids would agree with you. But,
well, we were saying earlier, isn't it? We don't really sort of talk about what we do outside of work because does anybody really understand?
Definitely not those three-letter acronyms.
No, we're trying to stay away from that. Although, quite a funny segue, actually, because today we are going to be talking about how to do ideal customer profiling well, which I know is a big subject, and we do shorten that to ICP. Yes. Absolutely. So let's start. It's a big subject, and obviously something we want to talk about today. Why is it so important, Charlotte? At the beginning of conversations with customers, and where does it go wrong?
So, yes, like where to start. It's a big answer. But I was having this conversation yesterday with a new client, and they hadn't done ABM before. That's actually not what we're doing for them at the moment, but they're talking to us about it. And we had exactly this conversation because he said to me, well, why is the ideal customer profiling a bit important? We already know who we want to target. And I think it's about sensibly and objectively assessing those companies that you think you want to target, beyond the demographics, beyond even the firmographics, but it's actually digging out those customers that have a greater propensity to buy from you and where you have a greater chance of succeeding, whether that's, so at a very basic level, you have a better chance of succeeding if you have case studies that relate to that target customer, if you have solved problems that customer has before, if you work with other companies that reflect that customer back at them. It's all those sorts of things at a very basic level, but it's so nuanced, and because it's so much more difficult to generate leads now, ideal customer profiling, I think, has become much more important, and it's definitely the sharp end of ABM, because if you get it wrong, you might not know for 6 to 12 to 18 months. So it's important not to skip over it and not just to have an emotional connection to logos that you just want to win.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've seen that, haven't we?
Many times.
We've spoken to clients initially, and it's the big shiny logos without any real background research into why that, but they know that they're big companies. They know they've got big budgets. Robert, you spoke about your ABM Essentials course.
Sure.
So where does this sit on the radar within your course? When you're talking about this and people coming in, is this a big subject that people want to understand, know about? Do people who come to the course, do they really understand the importance of really effective ICP planning?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and hopefully without scuppering the podcast as soon as we start, I don't spend a lot of time talking about ICP.
Right.
I do spend a lot of time talking about getting your strategy right, thinking about how you're going to focus your resources and selecting your accounts. So for me, if you think about tiering your accounts and prospects into relative value, size, that clearly is getting into the whole ICP piece and thinking of the types of people you want to reach within them. And I even have I guess you'd call it a scorecard, but an account selection process that looks at, first of all, what's the size of the opportunity, with some questions in there. Secondly, what's the realistic chance we have of winning this, achievability. And thirdly, what do the internal resources look like in terms of alignment between sales and marketing? And I think all three of those are actually important criteria. Whether you would call those purely ICP, I don't know. But I mean, I think the catch is with any three-letter acronym, there's lots of interpretations, isn't there?
Definitely.
But I think particularly if you're starting out and you're looking at a large number of accounts and you're trying to filter them, then clearly understanding what your ICP looks like and having some really clear criteria on how you're going to score them is really important.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And more as we've sort of been getting involved with these types of projects and campaigns, that alignment with sales, between marketing and sales, is ever so much more important, isn't it? I mean, that some of the things, our best successes have been when sales and marketing are working together on it, aren't they?
Definitely. And if you think about, particularly in the technology sector, which is where we work, you know, the traditional model for account selection was from the top down, and it was usually based on regional allocation of accounts. It was scraping off companies that fit a certain revenue size or industry cluster, and that was given to sales, and then that was then communicated, if you're lucky, to marketing to say, well, it would be helpful if you targeted these accounts as well. But a lot of the time that didn't even happen. So marketing was just going off and doing its thing, and then sales was going off over here and doing its thing. That's still the case in a lot of companies, to be honest. But I do think, because it is so much more difficult to generate leads now and to generate opportunities, because it's more difficult to meet people, there's more people you've got to talk to close a deal. You know, if sales and marketing work together really well to define those accounts properly and objectively, I think objectively is the key word here, then there's just going to be a much greater chance of success, because first of all, you're all on the same page, so that alone will generate success. But also you'll all know why you're going after those accounts and what to talk to them about, which is just as important, obviously. Yeah,
absolutely. Anybody that's been looking at us on LinkedIn or looked at our website will see that we've put a lot of focus in the role of the CRO, and we were talking about it earlier, and revenue enablement. And that sort of centre point now of really understanding where success is coming from and revenue growth coming from that point. So let's just talk about that. Let's just talk about the importance of that role, and is that the role that brings that alignment between sales and marketing? Is that the linchpin between the two? Or is it the two are always going to be working separately? I mean, some of our experiences we've had, as I rightfully said, you know, bringing those two elements together, but sometimes that can be a challenge. And so who's going to be taking the charge? Who's going to be holding the baton for that and saying, actually, this is my responsibility, and I'm going to get these two warring factions between sales and marketing coming together? I mean, what do you see?
It varies, I think, is what I see. I'd be interested to know what you come across, because, you know, for us, it sometimes the CRO, and I've talked about this many times, and actually this is where the name Soapbox came from, because I got accused of getting on my soapbox a few too many times about it. But the CRO role should be that connection between sales and marketing, but often it isn't. It's someone from sales that's been, you know, it's another way of saying chief sales officer to some companies. I think that's just the reality of the situation. But it should be the bit that connects it together. What we tend to see in reality is you'll get someone from marketing who believes in that alignment, and then if you're lucky, you'll get someone from sales as well who believes in that alignment, and then they work together. It's very rare that we come across a company that has that as a strategy. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think certainly from my perspective, you can't do account-based marketing if you don't have sales and marketing working closely together.
Exactly.
And I make a really big play of that. I also think it's very difficult to do account-based marketing if you don't have leadership, understanding and buy-in of what you're trying to achieve. And interestingly, the more conversations I've been having recently, it's actually how do you connect the whole organization? You know, I've done some work for a company recently who are literally embedding ABM at the heart of their entire go-to-market strategy. We had SVPs, VPs, I mean, everybody but the kitchen sink, was involved. And we've agreed, actually, operations need to be involved, customer success need to be involved.
Definitely.
And you might be intrigued to hear that finance need to be involved.
Wow.
And I think that comes back a full circle to the ICP, because I think marketeers should be having conversations with the finance team, to work out, well, where do we make our most money? Who are our most valuable customers?
Because this is where they always go quiet on us when we say, well, who are your most profitable customers? And then sales and marketing, neither of them know.
No, exactly.
Yeah, so that's good to hear.
So I think, almost, I mean, I know it's ambitious, but I think if you could go and have the conversations with the finance team, then you're driving things, I always talk about embedding ABM in the needs of the business. If you understand where your revenues come from, which are the most important accounts, how do you identify them? All you've got to do is some data analysis of your existing customers, right? So that's the starting point. Then I think, you could talk to customer success, you could work with the marketing ops team to actually segment and, analyze the data. And I agree, it's definitely got to be a double act. It can't be marketing dictating to sales, here's the ICP.
No, exactly.
But it can't be sales dictating to marketing either. I think it should be, a collaborative piece, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we were having a conversation the other day. Let's take that one step further, because we were talking to somebody the other day about internal communications.
Right.
So bringing it all the way back, particularly around mergers and acquisitions, and if you're bringing several new companies together and you've got to create a new messaging structure, a new sort of tone of voice, marketing strategy to support this new entity as such, bringing that all the way back to internal communications and then getting that tone of voice right. And then what does that look like then when you're extending it through the marketing strategy and then into sales and then customer success and all those other things as well? I mean, I don't know, is that going to be a sort of an interesting conversation that we might come back to? I don't know whether that's going to be a reality.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes get accused of sort of saying, so the answer's ABM, now what's the question? But from my point of view, if you have a holistic go-to-market strategy where you understand your total addressable market, you understand the accounts that you want to break into for the first time, the accounts you've got to grow, the accounts you've got to protect, the renewals and bids that you've got to look at on an annual cycle, very quickly that becomes your marketing strategy, that is embedded in the entire sales process. And so from that perspective, it's just common sense, I think. Your point about M&A, again, I'm doing some work at the moment with a company where two organizations have just merged. And there it's about brand and it's about trust. And, is that ABM? Well, to me, it is. Because you're basically branding your organization to the customers and prospects that really matter. You don't need to brand it to 65 million people in the UK, but you could probably identify the top 10, top 20, top 50, top 100 customers who, going back to the ICP word, fit that bill, and then work out the most effective way to position your organization to them.
And that's a really good point, because so often when companies are doing ideal customer profiles, they actually miss out the middle word entirely, because they don't look at their own customers and think, okay, well, what about the top 20% of customers that deliver the most profit and the most success to the business? If they're of a certain size and scale, there's probably things you could do to reach out more to them and to unlock some of the value in those accounts. But that's really interesting in that, apart from quite large companies, there's often, in the mid-tier, there's often not a lot of focus on existing customers outside of account management.
Yeah, which is just crazy, because it's where everything should start.
It should, 100%.
I mean, first, understand your existing customers, understand that the untapped revenue potential there for upsell, cross-sell, renewal, but then take that base and think, how can we replicate that?
Exactly, but they're often being gate-kept, whatever the correct tense of that is, by account management or by sales, because we don't want marketing reaching out to our customers, which to me seems a bit crazy, because that would help the sales team, I think.
For sure, no question about it.
But again, I think it comes down to that disparity between what sales are doing and what marketing are doing. Because they're not aligned, and I hate to keep banging on about marketing and sales alignment, but because they're not aligned, you get those types of scenarios, and ultimately it's the organisation that loses out on revenue. And
I mean, I think you sort of started to touch on whatever the right word is, but the malaise or the wrong positioning for marketing, which is they're the people that get the leads.
Yeah.
So it's all about demand gen.
Yeah.
It might be some brand, but basically it's about demand gen. And then you hand those leads to the sales organization and you hope they can convert them.
Yeah.
And guess what? The first thing they say is most of those leads aren't any good.
Yeah.
And those that are, obviously, they then take and run with. But there's no kind of collaboration in there. And it completely misses a trick that marketing has a really crucial role to play throughout the customer life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
To upsell, to cross-sell, to make sure they're informed and getting the right information about products and services. But also when you think about a lot of SaaS solutions and so on, it's about the renewal.
Yeah.
Or
Absolutely.
even utilization, and marketing should clearly be involved in that.
Yeah. It's amazing that they're not involved more.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So, is the drum starting to be being beaten as such more loudly by marketing? Is marketing going to be more pivotal? Are we still going to see these two sides battling? Or we spoke earlier, didn't we, about revenue enablement? Is actually just looking at revenue. How do we get the best revenue coming into our company? And so, in essence, those barriers fall away, and it's just coming together, that sort of utopian vision where you're looking at all those different elements, all those different departments to actually drive that success. I mean, is that the utopian vision? I mean, are you going to be running a course on that one day, Robert? Where you bring all these people in and say, right, I'm going to now propose something to you. Yeah. It could be your next course from now. We could be making this up as we go along now, but we get all these people together and just say, look, forget about what you do and what the rules and regulations are. Let's look at best practice. Let's look at, how can we create this energy to execute a new way of working. I mean, would you foresee that? I don't know.
Well, I'm already running workshops with multidisciplinary teams, if I could only say multidisciplinary. I managed it the second time.
That is the 10th cut on this.
No. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, when you have sales, marketing, customer success, people from the revenue team, from the finance team, sitting in a room talking about what should our strategy be, how do we select the right accounts, how do we focus on the key verticals, what is our go-to-market? Then I think you're actually in that position where you're, quote, living the dream, which is it's happening. I still think there are far too many organizations where it's siloed, and marketing are kind of going to sales, trying to engage them, or pitching the concept of ABM, as opposed to the organization's got it, they really want it. Now, how do we make it as successful as possible? Mm-hmm. So,
and that's really what it comes down to, isn't it? Is the leadership of the organisation, and I see this time and again in the tech sector, is that often the leadership of technology companies is sales or engineering led. It's usually one of those two, and even at the very largest scale, that can often be true. And with all due respect, neither of them are marketeers, and
true.
And so you run into those associated challenges. I think when you get someone in a leadership position who has, as part of their background, at least an understanding of marketing and where it can add value, like you say, it's not just a lead generation engine. And unfortunately, that's become the stick to beat marketing with. And it really, I think, undermines the overall value of marketing, which is quite interesting, because I think when you look at B2C, and this is an example I use a lot, you would be forgiven for thinking a brand like McDonald's wouldn't need to do marketing, because hey, they're a leading brand, right? Everybody knows who they are. Same with Coca-Cola. So two really enormous brands. They have some of the biggest marketing spend in the world. And the reason for that is because they understand the total value of marketing, that it's about I'm kind of going off topic a little bit here, but it is a soapbox. It is about building the brand. It is about generating sales. It is about, just generally communicating the values of the organization. And those consumer brands are really good at understanding the holistic value of marketing. And unfortunately, a lot of B2B brands aren't. And they say, well, if you're not generating leads that generate business, then you're rubbish. Well, that might be part of why it's not working, but that shouldn't be the only way to see marketing success.
Yeah. And the complexity of who you're talking to as well. So probably it might be a subject for another podcast, but the decision-making unit, DMU, the decision-making. But when you start getting all those various people in the room, obviously who they believe you should be talking to in relation to key decision makers and then the influencers around that, as you said earlier, that's getting broader and broader. And titles are becoming more and more diverse as well. So that's a big challenge. You know, once you've got your ideal customer profiling, actually then profiling the people who actually need to be seeing what you're talking about. And the importance, I suppose, of changing that narrative to some of those audience within the same campaign is becoming more complex as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because I know we mentioned this just before we started recording. We're partnering with a company that have analytical AI that can do it at scale, can learn from it, and then can chuck out information at the other end. And we use it for ideal customer profiling. So we can take 2 years worth of lead generation activity, for example, and we can pop that data set in there. And then what it does is you can query that data once it's gone through the machine learning, and I'm really skating along the depths of my knowledge here. But what I love about it is you can basically say, who are my most profitable customers?
Right.
What sectors are they in? Who are the decision makers in those customers that A, did the purchase, but B, were also in the CRM at the same time? So you capture those influences. So you can query into that data much more so than if you try to do it manually. And it's fantastic because it gives you, like we were saying at the beginning, that real objectivity. Like actually, those are the companies we should be going after, and they look like this and they behave like that, and there are these triggers that happen that are an indicator of, or a precursor of purchase, for example. So that's a really exciting way to, I mean, I know everyone's banging on about AI, but we are using it properly for that, and it unlocks some really interesting insights.
I think a lot of people are talking about AI, and I think very slowly now you can start to see the practical applications. So people are talking about it because it's very popular to talk about it now. What are the practical applications?
Yeah.
How do we use this technology to the best effect? I mean, again, Robert, you obviously see a lot of younger people coming to your courses because it's educational, it's important.
Younger than me, for sure. Although that wouldn't be that difficult.
No comment.
So is that a driving element? Are they keen to understand, or are they even coming to your courses with their own interpretation around how AI would work within ABM?
Well, there's unquestionably a lot of interest in AI.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, I think, is, and again, without hopefully sounding pedantic, because it's not my natural forte, but AI has obviously been with us for 10, 15 years and is embedded in all kinds of things we're already using. It's the Gen AI that everyone's kind of gone off on one about, you know, particularly driven by, you know, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I was at the Martechopia conference with B2B Marketing this week, you know, and of course everyone's talking about AI, but they mean Gen AI. We had a guy from Microsoft on stage showing exactly what you can do with ChatGPT. And of course, you know, the Copilot piece that they're now embedding in all of their software.
Yeah.
You know, so it's everywhere. Truthfully, in terms of the people who come on my courses, even though they are very young, of course, compared to me, they're not really kind of wanting to talk about AI. They're actually, what's ABM? How do we sell it in? How do we position it? How do we create our strategy? What does good look like when it comes to research and insight? How do we create value propositions? You know, so the stuff they're asking and the stuff I'm, of course, talking about is actually much more of a structured approach to how you run ABM. Does AI, Gen AI, any kind of AI have a role to play? Yes. And I think, you know, what Charlotte said in terms of really interrogating the information you have to select the right accounts, to prioritize them, all that kind of thing is a feeder, you know, for good ABM strategy. In the same way that, you know, the technology vendors that have been selling intent, you know, for the last 5 years, and obviously that's getting more sophisticated. There's, you know, whether you call it machine learning or artificial intelligence, that is helping companies find organizations that at least look like they might be in market. So there's a lot of stuff circling around. I have to confess, I'm not an AI evangelist or guru.
I don't think any of us are. I think we're still learning.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
We're trying to understand what those practical applications are.
Yeah.
And then how do you use those in the real world, I guess.
Exactly. I mean, one snippet, and I hope he's not listening to this podcast, but if he is, hello. One of my clients actually said to me, we're going to do a piece of research for a one-to-few program, and I thought he was, he had a supplier, but he's now fessed up to the fact that he's actually going to use ChatGPT to do this piece of research into an entire industry sector.
Wow.
And I'm like all ears, or all eyes. I'd like to see the results.
Yeah, what's the outcome?
Exactly, because right now, as far as I'm concerned, that still requires a huge amount of human intelligence and analysis to really come up with stuff that's interesting and useful.
Well, and also the accuracy of it, because if he's using ChatGPT 3.5 or 4.0, that all cut off back in late 2021 in terms of its knowledge base. So it can.
I hear things. I trotted that out recently, Charlotte, and someone said, "Oh no, it's all been updated."
No,
so I don't know if it has or not.
The enterprise version, if they've got the enterprise version, that is
I hope they
more
have.
recent. Yeah. But no, it is interesting, isn't it? And I was with a client yesterday who have their own Gen AI. I've got to be really careful what I say. Their own Gen AI platform.
Jedi warrior.
Jedi, yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. It's
nice,
quite hard to say.
Snappy piece of branding there.
I know. I kept
Jedi the AI.
Jedi the AI. Yeah, I kept doing that in the meeting. I couldn't pronounce it. I've totally lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
Now. No, that's fine. So they would, when we were looking at the technology and understanding the technology, and it was quite amazing how. Because I think a lot of people hear AI and they think machine learning AI, which is one of the ones that's been around for quite some time, which, can pull together lots of data. But what it can't do is contextualize the data. So this is why ChatGPT obviously was so revolutionary, because you can put queries in and you can connect strings of queries in old parlance. But it was really fascinating to see how. And this was in a particular use case, but you could query it to say, well, if X and Y is true, then what does that mean for A and B? And that's where I think Gen AI is going to really add a layer to things like research. Not yet, and it would cost a lot of money to build the data sets, but I do think it could be quite exciting to say, if I'm XYZ technology company and I want to target Marks and Spencer, for example, then how should I do that? And then see what comes out. I think that's definitely a possibility.
I think what I'm really excited about with this, and Robert, you spoke about it, about finding companies that are in market, and that is the holy grail, of course it is. But equally so, trying to find those businesses who are more likely transitioning to be into market, so you come on that journey with them. And some of the things that we've been playing around with AI and ideal customer profiling is look at some real fringe type things. Look at the criteria that you wouldn't have normally looked at, and can AI go searching that out? What's the typical trends? And I'm not going to give it away on this podcast because I want to keep it close to us. But what are the typical trends that actually a company who's transitioning from the 95% not in market to the 5% who are in market? And equally so, although that's then engaging you maybe in a longer sales process or marketing and sales process, it means that you're embedded earlier, as we rightfully said, when you've got that problem identification conversation going on, you're embedded earlier in that conversation across that wider DMU, structuring something, and it might bring them to market quicker even. So everybody's focusing at the top of the peak, rightfully so, because obviously they're the people that got the budget allocated. But I'm really interested about, okay, well, there's 95% of the market that isn't in market, and the rich seams that are in there that can be brought along through that understanding and education. And I think, for me, using AI, and that's what gives you that competitive advantage, because you're at the table before everybody else. You're having those conversations before everybody else across that wider decision-making unit.
Sure.
And I think that's going to be the clever stuff. I think that's going to be that all of a sudden, this company's got a deal. Where did that come from? Oh, well, okay, we've been talking to them for 2 years about it, and maybe that's, that's the power of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's quite an interesting conversation in there, which is the whole 5% are in market, 95% aren't. And it's curious that even companies like Demandbase and Sixth Sense, who obviously have built their business on targeting the 5% and providing intent and insight and all those kinds of things, the last 2 or 3 conferences over the last year or two, they've been standing up on stage talking about the importance of brand and the importance of the 95%.
100%. I was just going to say.
Well, I think
Hang on, there's so many percentages flying around here.
I think 95 plus 5 definitely is 100%. I think very perceptive, yeah. So I think it's interesting they've worked out the 95% are important. Then there's another data point that says actually something ridiculous, like 80% of companies have done their research and shortlisted their vendors before you've spotted it. So if you're not one of those 3 to 5 vendors on their shortlist, you've already missed the boat on the 5%, which then says the 95% becomes even more important. So then the question is, how do you segment that? And if you talk about, mind that microphone. if you talk about total addressable market being the 95%, okay, plus the 5, then how do you segment that? And if you said based around ideal customer profile and the intelligence you have as an organization, there are 5 verticals that are mission critical to us, or there are 200 accounts that look interesting, but of those 200, actually 40 look really interesting. Then, instead of just flailing around saying, what about the 95%? You can focus your attentions on the accounts in the 95% that you really want to do business with. And we come back a full circle. That's ABM.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's using a strategic approach to making account selection, focusing your resources in the right places, and doing the intelligent stuff. If you can pick up on the 5% as well, fantastic. But I think chasing after the 5% that are in market, where everybody's scrapping and there's so much noise, is actually a bit of a red herring.
I agree.
What do you think we've learned today talking about this? What have we solved?
What have we
Have we
solved?
solved anything? Have we created more questions?
I fear possibly we've not solved anything. But I probably feel a bit better talking about it. But
Yeah, of course we do.
Well, this is where we need a virtual audience and pinging in with loads of questions.
That's right,
but,
yeah.
We're going to bring in the canned applause in a minute, actually. Like those 1970
put your comments below.
Yeah, so what would you, if we were going to talk about what's the takeaways about ideal account profiling? What are the takeaways? Anybody listening to this, what have we really said? Have we just warbled on, or just?
Yeah.
Well, it's a good challenge. I mean, is there value in having an ICP? Yes. I mean, unquestionably. Know who your most important customers are and what they look like, and find a way to be able to assess your current customers and prospective customers to meet those criteria. So if that's an ICP, of course it has real value. But I also think in some ways the ICP is a bit like personas. It's something everybody thinks, well, we must have an ICP or we must have personas. But actually, if you're selling to 10, 50, 100 accounts, even the personas become a bit of a sort of distraction, because you can say, well, in the decision-making unit, there are always these 10 roles. So let's go and find those actual people in those accounts. Then they cease to be personas and they start to be real people.
Real people.
Which again, in my world, in an ABM lens, is what it's all about. It's not about creating, well, Bill's 33 and he's married with 2 kids and he drives a Golf. It's actually, well, who is Bill? And what is he talking about?
Who is Bill
online?
at that company? And
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which moves away from the theory of personas into real people. And I think with ICPs, whilst it's helpful probably for marketing to have that, it's helpful for sales to understand it. If you're looking at 10, 50, 100 accounts, then drill into them in a significant way, where the theory of an ICP becomes, I think, less important than the reality of those actual accounts.
Yeah.
But I think it has value at an early stage.
Absolutely, because it should be the checklist through which you refine those accounts down. But agree, it's not the be all and end all. So, but it is really important to get right. So if you can analyze data at scale across your organization, and like you say, across finance, across sales and marketing, and customer success, renewals teams, all of that. If you can bring all that together and run that analysis as we were talking about, which is obviously how we diverted down the AI track. But if you can run that analysis, then you come out with a list of, okay, this is what all of our successful customers look like. The next stage of that, which we're just starting to look at, is then you get those 10, 50, 100 accounts that you're looking at. You feed their data into that same AI instance.
And it will find you the lookalikes.
And it will say, these 10, 50, 100 companies reflect that customer data back. And the algorithm is tested, so you know that it's true and accurate. And then that sort of validates those candidates then. And then I think that just sets you up so well for success. But it's hard to do it manually.
Yeah.
Well, none of us want to do that manually.
No.
What are you talking about?
Some people like data.
Well, hopefully everybody's listening today has found that quite fascinating. It's always good to just sit down and chew the fat, isn't it? And Robert, thank you for coming in today.
Yeah,
My pleasure.
You.
I've added some insights of value. I'm not sure, but I'll do my best.
It's been really good. And I'm sure we're going to have you back about a myriad of different subjects that we all think about to talk about.
Well, as long as it's got ABM somewhere in the dialogue, I'll be up for it.
We promise you we'll do.
But I'm very happy to go off-piste and talk about brand and all kinds of other things too.
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
Well, again, thanks everybody. And we'll see you next time when we get on our Soapbox.